Perfect. Okay, thank you. So like Davey mentioned, my name is Mike, and I represent an organization called U.S. Friends of the Soviet People. We are an organization that seeks to support struggles to restore socialism in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union after the counter-revolution in 1991. And I believe it is important for us to start back in 1991, at the time when American hegemony was claiming victory over the socialist forces. The famed "not 1 inch east" proposal that the U.S. had agreed to with then General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev was meant to be an assurance that the Eurasian landmass would be free from NATO interference and expansion. However, as we all know, this would not last as imperialist forces continued to push farther east into Eastern Europe. One by one, the former Soviet countries were absorbed into the organization. Yugoslavia was broken apart to make way for a military base in Kosovo, and within decades, NATO was now dangerously close to Russia's borders. In 2014, the US would fund and take part in the Euromaidan in Ukraine, allowing reactionary and fascist forces to take over the country. In the coming months, Russian citizens living in the Ukraine would be subject to abuse, killings, and other acts of terror. Ultimately, this would result in the Donbass region seceding and becoming independent states. Ukraine would then lead a bloody campaign for over 8 years that resulted in over 14,000 citizens being killed by Ukrainian forces and their neo-Nazi forces as well, terrorized the people in the Donbass. This is what has led us to the events spiraling in front of us today that we must act upon. The US-NATO alliance has sought regime change in Russia not only since the counter-revolution in 1991, but since 1917, when Russia overthrew the Tsar in the Bolshevik Revolution. America has always painted the Russian people as outsiders to the European project, as people who are uneducated and callous. We even see this Russophobia fomenting in the way Russians are deemed orcs by far-right forces and the various ways they have been harassed, beaten, and killed for years. American media has laid the grounds for this current manifestation of Russian prejudice and hatred by the virulent ways it portrays them in every medium, from movies featuring Russians as main antagonists who are determined to destroy the US, as well as military propaganda present in video games that proclaim around every corner and in every country Russians are poised to take over the entire world. But it's these exact portrayals that the US is guilty of. Countless coups, counter-revolutions, and assassinations carried out in countries on every continent. The idea of a multipolar world is simply unacceptable to the United States. NATO is willing to sacrifice the entire population of Ukraine to weaken Russia. When history looks back on the current proxy war, it will be the US, EU, NATO alliance whose hands will be responsible for the blood spilled. We must also speak about the propaganda war being waged against the People's Republic of China and Washington's long attempts at destabilizing the country and the Communist Party of China. The US government itself has admitted that the NED funded forces in Xinjiang to foment unrest in the region. Recently, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has taken it upon herself to visit Taiwan and proclaim she, quote, stands in solidarity with the island. The US has long used Taiwan to keep a foothold in the region and to further delay the inevitable reunification with mainland China. The tensions being stoked by American imperialism are further causing harm to the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean populations living in the US. Hate crimes soar when mainstream media proclaim China a deadly enemy that must be stopped by any means. As with Russia and so with China, the US is only interested in total spectrum dominance and a unipolar order that allows them to engage in the worldwide looting of countries' resources. The crisis of US imperialism has left the working class in the country, as well as in Europe, in a further precarious state. Workers in several states in America deal with unsafe drinking water, power outages with poor infrastructure, outrageous housing conditions, and costs. Yet the US establishment has given untold billions of dollars to defense companies and abroad. Instead of allowing for a ceasefire and negotiation between Russia and Ukraine, arms sales are skyrocketing. In Europe, the population is being told that they must be willing to sacrifice everything for the cause of Ukraine. Mass unrest is growing, and it is up to anti fascist forces around the world to be there when the public becomes disillusioned. Thank you.